When the going gets tough, the tough needs to get going. Now, to keep going, to make sure your business not just survives but also thrives in this chaos, you need the latest insight and intel from the local and global business scenario. And that is exactly what we deliver to you in Biznomics. I'm Taridu Amarasekara. Welcome to your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Now, artificial intelligence, a term that many people speak of, and knowingly or unknowingly, you too might be using it and being a part of it on a daily basis. For example, every time you use an app, there might be an AI component in it. We are talking about a possible future, a not so distant future, with automated cars. Well, that's AI. Every time you are using some of the software systems, or every time you take a flight, those flights do get planned with some of the AI systems. What exactly is this AI about, or in other words, artificial intelligence about, and what role will it play from a business perspective and an economic perspective as we keep moving into this uncertain and chaotic future? To talk about that, we have a very special guest joining us today, a world-class Sri Lankan, as I would love to introduce him, the Australian Computer Society's ICT Professional of the Year, and a director at the Centre for Sustainable Artificial Intelligence. Please welcome in today's episode Dr. Mahendra Samaravikrama. Dr. Samaravikrama, absolute honor to have you with us on the show today, and welcome to Biznomics.
Thank you, Tarind. It's a great pleasure for me as well to talking to Biznomics.
Dr. Samaravikrama, let's talk about getting an idea, especially from a layman's perspective, for the benefit of all our viewers. Some of them might not really be aware of what exactly AI is about. So, to get a clear understanding and a basic footing, how do we define artificial intelligence as? And over the years, how has it evolved? It used to be something we only hear in the movies and more like science fiction, but I believe that science fiction based world has become a reality by way more than what we would have ever dreamt of. Demystify to us about AI and how it has evolved. Let's start with that.
Yes, AI is basically machines perform human-like cognitive processes like learning, validation, reasoning. So this is not a new term. Like Alan Turing, as I remember, introduced the Turing test to evaluate artificial intelligence around 1950s. Then natural language processing used in ELISA kind of softwares 1960s, 70s, and early 2000 IBM supercomputer Deep Blue defeat world chess champion Garry Kasparov, and it's quite old topic. And recently AI increased quite exponentially because of large amount of data and research focused on algorithms, and high performance computing enhanced recently and AI enhanced. And also in modern days we mainly telling AI for deep learning, which is mainly deep neural network. The fundamental breakthrough happened 2011 by a Canadian professor when inventing multiple layers neural network.
Understood. So what you're saying is that yes, AI has evolved over the years in a big and massive way, but just to understand some of these terms you mentioned, for example, deep learning, does that mean that computers of today can learn from the internet, from digital books and various other sources, just like a normal human being can go on the internet and learn? Is that what you are saying?
Machine learning, the AI, the underlying technology is machine learning. In machine learning, we can primarily split into three branches: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Now, what you mentioned, like the AI has an ability to self-learn, but it requires data. Now, data is the oil, and
the new oil.
New oil, and AI is the electricity.
And I believe we are in a world where we have about 30 trillion gigabytes of data every day, and by 2026 it's expected to go to about 170, 180 trillion gigabytes. So as you said, massive amount of data, and to analyze this, like how humans would do, we need technologies like AI. Am I right?
Yes. So data is these days let's say generate from people, internet of people, but we are moving into internet of things, which machines generate quite a lot of data, and data is exponentially growing. And when it comes to deep neural network, the amount of data is relates with the accuracy of the algorithms.
Correct.
More data means more accurate in terms of not all the perspectives of algorithms, but particularly when it comes to deep neural networks, having more data, the quality of the data is also important, but having more data and the quality of data means we can produce quite high quality AI solutions.
Understood. Now, in other words, what we are looking at is computer systems have the ability to think like humans and make smart decisions, which ultimately will help us to live an easier and better life through AI. What are the areas of application we see, Dr. Mahendra, in this area? For example, what about in areas like healthcare, transportation? Where do we see applications of AI right now as we speak? Not in the future, but even right now as we speak. I believe AI is having a massive role in so many different industries and verticals. Where do we see some of these innovative applications?
Yes, as I mentioned, AI is fundamentally performing human-like cognitive processes.
Cognitive means thinking oriented.
Yeah, thinking oriented. So like imitate brain functions. Now, in this perspective, recent AI quite achieved natural language processing and image processing, video processing, and automation, autonomous navigation, and data science and data analytics space. Now, it can be health sector, it can be retail, it can be manufacturing. These are quite broad spectrum of application. As I mentioned, if the data is available and if the data is reasonably quality, and the significant amount data is available, now there are quite a lot of opportunities. We can apply machine learning and AI on top of this data and build predictive, prescriptive models, data models, which are fundamental of AI.
Interesting. So, let's say if you take an area like healthcare, are we looking at a possibility that some of the work that a doctor is doing right now, maybe analysis of a particular or a diagnosis of a particular illness, are AI systems capable of doing that? Look at the reports, look at the scans, and get an idea as to what might be wrong, with a maybe not so perfect accuracy like a human, but to a human doctor, but to some extent?
Yes. So, in this context, adaptation and augmentation is very important. Now, AI can greatly support on doctors, do image processing and like identify maybe cancer cells and do image processing on X-rays, MRI scans. So, and also if the data is properly structured with a lot of other patients, then doctors can get predictive and prescriptive consultation from AI.
Right.
Now they are
predictive as in what can happen and prescriptive as in what they should do.
Yes. So predictive means what can happen, and prescription explain basically actionable insights.
Correct.
And
what medicines to take maybe.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So on. Okay,
yeah.
Understood. And now that's from a healthcare perspective, as you said. But if you look at today, Dr. Mahendra, now we are always using these apps, even for example social media. Now sometimes if you take what we see on social media, they say there is a AI component involved where the platforms decide what kind of content to show you. If you have 1,000 friends on Facebook and Facebook will show, let's say, content to you from 200 of your friends, they will decide what to show you based on a particular AI method. And maybe even on YouTube, the videos they show you, they say that YouTube is using certain AI algorithms to decide what kind of videos to show you. Is these true to some extent, and what are your thoughts? Is there AI at play in social media as well?
Yes, so customer experience and user experience are like fundamental capability that AI deliver. Now, AI use behavior analytics these days, and AI is used in recommendation engines. Now, that's true, like quite a lot of applications analyze the users' actions, behaviors on certain platforms, and they will try to give more relevant content to you and enhance your customer experience in terms of products and services. Now, the important thing is like the ethical nature of these applications developed. That's a different topic, but
we will get to that as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but as you mentioned, enhancing customer experience in these mobile applications by recommending and delivering the right content at right time to the right user and personalize the user experience is a key capability that AI can deliver.
Fantastic. And before we head for a short break, AI, yes, sounds like a world of possibilities and opportunities. But when I get a machine to think like a human, we all know, you and I both can agree, I believe the viewers will also agree, humans, when they are given the freedom to think and act, there is no limit to that. Yes, there are rules, but they also break the rules. That's why we have prisons and jails and so on. What about when machines, when they begin to think freely, when they begin to think openly? What if they go beyond those rules and break those rules? In other words, responsible AI. What exactly is that about?
So, the fundamental difference of AI compared to other technologies that it's automated decision making ability. As I mentioned, it's like it performs the cognitive actions that in a similar way that humans do. Now, because of this, people more concerns on ethics and regulations and compliance and legal perspectives of AI. Now, there are regulations emerging. A lot of people look into not only AI, the underlying data as well, because what we see as AI is a product that emerged from the data we used and the human decision makings on implementing certain algorithms and determine certain parameters on these algorithms. There is a human involvement in certain processes, certain stages of AI process.
Understood.
Now, at the same time, the data, selection of the data. Now, these are like fundamentally that people now looking into governance of AI transformation, and regulations, controls are primary focus these days.
Understood. So what you're saying is that as AI gets more complicated and more human-like, we need to have more rules, governance, especially governance, and make sure that AI is used in a more responsible and I would say more socially acceptable manner as well, isn't it? Because we talk of a world with the possibility of this digital twin. I mean, myself, there can be my own version in the digital world, and that can be created using AI, but I might not have any control over that twin of mine if that twin develops a mind of its own, because we know that even twins don't always think alike. Is this not a danger that humans are facing in general?
No, the digital twin term used that in the operational optimization perspective. Now, same infrastructure platform or systems with the use of like IoT kind of technology, we replicate that same system in the digital space with using the data.
Okay.
So, in that context,
so that's more from an operational perspective.
It's an operational perspective.
Right. But let's say even from a human perspective, we are talking about a world with metaverse where, you know, our version, ourselves, a digital version is actually getting created. It's happening as we speak. We create our own avatars and all that. And these avatars are obviously using certain level of AI as well when interacting and going about inside the metaverse. What's the guarantee, Dr. Mahendra, that my avatar, my own digital version in a digital world, what if they go beyond? Is this go beyond my thing, and what if I lose control of that? Is this not a risk that we are looking at?
Yes, as I mentioned, AI is like a double-edged sword. It has huge benefit for economical perspective. At the same time, there is a great risk because of biases. There is a deep fake, then socio-economic inequality issues.
Deep fake is where they use a person's picture and make a video which is very real-like, as if that person is saying something in his or her own voice, but it's totally unreal. Like there was a video of the Queen of England dancing on her table, which was a deep fake.
Yes, exactly. So these are the risks, and while there are quite a lot of, like it says by 2030, more than $15 trillion can be contributed to global economy. It is like more than 14% global GDP increase. Now it's quite benefit while create risk. That is why, as you mentioned, like in Industry 4.0, like that technology governance, AI governance is a very important perspective. We are looking into ethics, law, and regulations compliance, and that is where legislators, leaders looking into that perspective.
Understood. What are the areas of AI that Sri Lanka can explore further, and what can we do to improve the role of women in tech in Sri Lanka? Let's talk about that on the other side of the short break. This is Biznomics. Welcome back to Biznomics. We are in conversation with the ICT Professional of the Year in Australia, and who is also the director of the Centre for Sustainable AI, Dr. Mahendra Samaravikrama. Dr. Samaravikrama, let's talk about how AI and sustainability relate, because now the entire world is actively looking at this UN Sustainable Development Goals, and you're a strong believer that AI has a massive role to play in that. What's the connection you see?
In year 2015, United Nations adopted this United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, looking peace and prosperity of people and planet. So that is the one of the fundamental frameworks for sustainability. And when people talk about social impact, environmental social governance, that is a valid framework we can focus. Now, research identified more than like roughly 80% of these sustainable development goals can be achieved through AI. That because of that, in ethical perspective, consequentialism perspective, there is a responsibility we have that adopt AI to achieve these sustainable development goals. At the same time, that market research identified like 85% of projects fail due to bias and bias related to data, AI teams and algorithms, and that's a risk of failing AI. Now, to manage this AI risks while supporting the sustainable development goals, we need to govern AI. So because of that, because of AI capability to drive sustainable development goals, and it is very important to mitigate risk while we supporting the sustainable development goals, we need to focus on AI governance and AI.
So what you're saying is that for the achievement of the sustainability development goals of the United Nations, what's really required is, yes, you can use AI towards achieving some of those goals, but use it with the right governance. can we take an example of certain sustainable development goals, and can you show us how AI can help to achieve that?
Let's say get the first two, maybe like first two sustainable development goals, reducing the poverty and the hunger. So now we know in globally the food distribution is not evenly happen, and we know
I think in some of the countries about 30% of the food is getting destroyed due to lack of proper distribution.
Yes, exactly, and because of the supply chains issues, and also at the same time some of the countries they don't have enough food.
Correct.
Now
climate change has made the matters worse now.
Exactly.
More drought means less crop too.
Exactly. So then what is AI and data science enable to real-time monitoring this distribution, and then efficiently distribute these food stocks and support and defeat the global hunger.
Understood. Understood. When talking about the role of women in tech, now you are having your work experience in Australia, and Australia is a country that has had many great strides towards making sure there is equality for women when it comes to the tech sector. Dr. Samaraweekran, from your own experience, in what areas can Sri Lanka improve and allow more women to take part in tech? And globally, from your experience in Australia as well, globally, where do you see this topic of role of women in tech heading towards?
If we take the same framework, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 5th Sustainable Development Goal is gender equality, and the 10th Sustainable Development Goal is reducing inequality. And both these Sustainable Development Goals talk about promoting diversity, equity and inclusion. Now, research identified like representation of women's in tech sector is not up to the level, and fundamentally those kind of inequality issues impact on the quality of the product and services. For example, it can enhance the biases, right? So to mitigate the biases and related risks, gender equality and also reducing the other inequalities. It can be cultural diversity, and we need to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and gender equality is one of the important areas in that domain. Because of that, lot of countries now promote women in tech, women in engineering, women in AI, women in governance,
women in data.
Women in data. So there is emerging initiatives, and countries show quite significant progress, and Australia is one of the leading country in that initiative. I think Sri Lanka also very strong in that this initiative. Sri Lanka has world first Prime Minister, and there's no issue that
versus female Prime Minister. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is very important to enhance the diversity, equity, inclusion in this tech, to mitigate biases and get many perspectives and enhance the quality of the products and services.
Now, from an education viewpoint, Dr. Samaraweekran, what are the main education gaps you see in the Sri Lankan education system? I mean, you yourself, you are a product of the Sri Lankan education system, so am I. But when now that you've seen the world, you've seen how education system works in other countries as well, in countries like Australia and so on, what are the main gaps you see in our education policies that needs to be addressed so that we can have especially our younger generations, the school level generation, ready for the tech sector jobs? Because I personally believe that one of the key problems we have in Sri Lanka is that we don't give enough technology competencies and skills at a school level. As a result, if they drop out of the school level and if they don't reach the university, and you and I both know that it's about only 10% of the university of the A-level students who actually come to the universities. The other 90% don't really get a chance to come to the university level, and they lose out the chance to learn tech. Is this not a problem that we need to address?
Yes, so we need significant education reform. For example, as you mentioned, now many countries look introducing AI syllabus into high school, and we are not waiting till the university. And also vocational training is very important, that as you mentioned, if we identified only few percent going into universities, then we need to enhance the vocational training aligning with AI. And legislation also should identify the Industry 4.0 as a key strategic milestone that they need to achieve in future. So the policies that we need to work with legislation, and we need to establish regulations, policies and compliance to mitigate risks while creating and driving the AI transformation in the right direction. And education is one of the key areas.
Understood. So, do you think that we need to look at getting our school level students, maybe those who are in the O-level, A-level stages, prepare them and train them on how to take up work in some of the platforms like Fiverr? Because, for example, when the schooling system is done, and if they don't get selected to university, and like I said, 90% of them can't go to the local university because of the capacity issue, and especially in rural areas we see this problem, they end up getting onto the roads with tuk-tuks and the productivity is completely gone. Should we not look at least training them for some of the areas like data, at least data entry level work, which they can start off with, which on some of the platforms like Fiverr has tremendous potential? Don't you think, Dr. Mahindra, that these are opportunities we should address?
Yeah, there's a significant opportunity in this AI transformation space. We should not wait. That is so sure, that because in all the many countries now focused Industry 4.0, and they identified the importance of AI transformation. People use AI for enhancing the productivity and the customer experience. Now, coming back to your topic, you mentioned there are certain areas that we need to address in that perspective. One is we need to give students some trainings on entrepreneurship, because if you talk about Fiverr kind of platform, it's in one way it's a good marketplace for people to work on new products and services, and that is one expectation of AI, building a new revenue streams. And there are many digital workspace creating and new products and services emerging. Now, that's very important, and at the same time, not only the AI training, the entrepreneur like startups, people how to manage a business, that knowledge and the education also very important. At the same time, I believe legislation should make proper regulations, governance structures and policies to perform this, enable this AI transformation more smoothly. So that in that perspective, the leaders and the organizations, authorities and the legislation has some responsibility in that perspective. As you mentioned, there's no doubt that we need to introduce AI data, tech education, school level. But it is it's a much broader strategy, that it's not just like introducing the education, new education and syllabus to the high school, but rather create some kind of a pipeline and
Understood.
then establish that platforms, processes and the regulations.
Do you think language will be a problem when doing this? Because we do know most of the technology is still in English and so on. Do you think language will be an issue in this matter?
Communication skill and presentation skill is two skills that that we need for customer experience and brand advocacy. So in that perspective, yes, language, I am not telling the language, I don't want to bring the term language, but we need to teach, give the communication skill and the presentation skill and the right mindset, the most importantly, to these new entrepreneurs and the students, how to win the future.
Dr. Samaravickrama, those days we used to have copyright checkers. We still do have in Sri Lanka copywriters, or those who will go through the documents carefully, document translators, etc. Now we have AI systems such as Grammarly for that. We do have very talented artists who can draw beautiful paintings, but today we have AI platforms that can generate a painting based on the description that you are giving. Are we looking at a future where some of the traditional jobs will simply get replaced and will be obsolete because of the developments in AI?
That is an identified risk. That is why the people more talk about augmentation. Now, in that way, while there are some jobs are at risk, and there are many new opportunities create at the same time. Now, that is why, as if you want to direct the country, now leaders, the IT professionals and the authorities should identify what are the areas that impact and what areas that new values are created, and then we need to facilitate the people to absorb these new skills. In that perspective, it can be vocational training, it can be a degree program, it can be high school students. They need to understand what are the new skills we want for the future. Now, that is very important. At the same time, automation related job loss is a risk, and there are certain regulations now. Lot of countries looking into to control this and govern some of the risks and enable more augmentation, bringing how they are looking, how people can be reskilled.
Understood. Some interesting thoughts there, Dr. Samaravickrama. We are going to come back to you on more details on that. Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is BizNomics. Welcome back to BizNomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Tharundu Amarasekara. Our focus today is on artificial intelligence and the role of tech in economic revival in a sustainable way. And we are in conversation with Dr. Mahendra Samaravickrama. Dr. Samaravickrama, in your view, in your perspective, what are the major tech trends you see, apart from AI, into the next decade as we look at from 2022 to 2030? What are the major tech trends you would say that are evident, and if you could elaborate a little bit on them? We talk about metaverses, we are talking about IoT. What are the main tech trends that you see?
Yes, so we are in fourth industry revolution. We say
Industry 4.0.
Industry 4.0, and AI is a cornerstone in this concept. But there are IoT, 5G, then as you mentioned, metaverse and immersive experience, blockchain, and robotics. There are data science and data analytics. So there are a lot of other technologies are emerging, and to success in the industry 4.0, we need to look into broad spectrum of these different technologies, and it's quite a lot of skill gap. And then I think there are a lot of opportunities emerging as well through this industry 4.0.
And do you see that those will bring about economic opportunities for Sri Lankan tech enterprises as well?
Now, based on the statistics, like as I mentioned, like by 2030, it's predicted like more than 15 trillion US dollars will add into the world economy by 2030 from AI. That contribution is little bit, there is a difference when we compare developing and developed countries. For example, for developed countries, it can be roughly 14 to 20%, and for developing countries, it might be 5% or 5 to 10%. Because of that, different countries should be like extra careful on how to keep face on with this significant AI transformation.
How well we are ready to grab a part of the pie.
Exactly. So therefore, we need to do the right strategic analysis, and then we need to uplift our young generation skills and prepare the young generations to work on these emerging technologies and Industry 4.0.
Absolutely. When you talk about technology and economic growth, how do you see Australia using technology and opportunities in technology for growing the economy? Because Australia also has largely been an agriculture-based economy, and then they were into the mining industries and all that. China was a major customer for them, and etc. But now we see Australia also going towards a certain tech-based economic growth. And you have been involved in developing some of the policies as well for the government. What role do you see for tech adoption in enabling economic growth?
I think every country these days, they identified AI transformation, and the emerging technologies are key for economic prosperity. Not only economic prosperity, but also emerging environmental, social and governance perspective, ESG perspective, and the sustainability perspective. Now, if you look into economic perspective, the productivity increase is one of the key success factor. It says AI can increase the productivity by 40%, and that significantly enhance the revenue. At the same time, customer experience, personalized services, most of the blue ocean strategies around the data are creating more opportunities and values for the product and services. So these are very important in future economic prosperity, and that is why it says by 2030 it can increase the global GDP by 14%. So like Australia, they identified the importance of this AI transformation, and in the same way, like they looking into, for example, they looking into education reform.
And they include AI education as well.
Exactly. So bringing AI educations to the high schools, and then creating more policies and regulations to enhance the quality of the AI transformation, and focusing on the Industry 4.0 and build more new skills and creating opportunities. I think for example, for Sri Lanka as a developing country, as specified in the United Nations 17th last Sustainable Development Goals, partnerships and collaborations can bring more, can create more values and opportunities. At the same time, there are Sustainable Development Goals like quality education and the smart cities and growth. Economic growth.
Yes.
Economic growth.
Even for areas like climate change.
Climate change, and Sri Lanka is surrounded by an ocean.
Correct.
And then
highly polluted ocean, unfortunately.
Not necessarily it's a beautiful country like tourism.
Yes, but we do have a problem of the oceans being extremely polluted, Dr. Samarithra. And I believe AI will have it's a beautiful country, beautiful ocean, yes, but we can't forget the fact that it's extremely polluted with all the plastics and all which are getting dumped. So don't you see AI being able to have a role in that as well? And can Sri Lanka adopt these technologies to fight some of our own challenges?
Yes, exactly. So AI, as I mentioned, like 79% of sustainable development can get support from AI, and life under ocean is one of the sustainable development goals.
Correct.
And there are a lot of research going around, like waste management, and what are the understanding the areas that more like impact by this pollution.
Correct.
And we can regulate and control. I think data informed decision making and data analytics can play a major role in that perspective. And it's not like we can't localize those kind of problem only to Sri Lanka. It's a global challenge.
Correct.
And that is why the partnerships and collaborations are very important in this space.
When it comes to creating AI systems, now if you look at back in the day, it was all about coding, and write lines and lines of code to develop an AI system. But I believe we live in a world today where we can simply look at the possibility of dragging and dropping and building an AI system. You get studios like IBM Watson Studio and all, where you can drag and drop components and build your own AI systems. What are your thoughts on that? Is it becoming easier for even a non-tech professional to have a little bit of learning and then build their own AI systems? Because and those are the very platforms based on which, for example, if you look at the Abu Dhabi National Oil Corporation, they've built systems that can detect the areas of high probability where oil can be. So they scan the soil and the rocks on top of that particular area, and based on the image recognition of AI, they are able to say, okay, this is where we should drill and we have a high probability of finding oil here. Now, when you have such nationally critical economic systems being built on AI, don't you think that on AI platforms which are just easy drag and drop mechanisms at the heart of it, don't you see that, or don't you think that non-tech professionals too can become much more tech savvy by learning these systems? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think democratizing AI in this context, democratizing AI is like emerging and now had quite a lot of success. We are talking about low code and no code in some of the tools, for example, MLOps, ModelOps, some of the governance tools.
Correct. And then you have mid-journey platforms which are just basic low coding. One line of a description and it generates the art for you. I mean,
that's right. So that's basically now AI developers and leaders, they want to democratize this capability, and we are not looking into many code, but we try to make this AI transformations smooth as possible. And in that context, as you mentioned, there are a lot of tools come like drag and drop and user-friendly interfaces, and then abstraction layers appear to hide the complexity of many previously more complex processes. Now, I believe like in near future, natural language processing would be like more than enough to build product and services around AI.
On a final note, what is your advice to any IT professional or tech professional or an aspiring tech professional who is watching this show? How can they make themselves future-proof? Because we don't want our tech professionals to study technology today that is going to go out of fashion and trend tomorrow. How can tech professionals make themselves future-proof?
I want to recommend, like, first be aware of this industry 4.0 and related technologies.
So that is AI, blockchain, Internet of Things, cloud,
exactly.
Cybersecurity, etc.
Yes, exactly. And that awareness is very important, because the technology landscape is rapid changing, and what is the technologies available right now might change very shortly, and it is very important having this awareness, and people should, at the same time, people should adopt this to enhance their productivity, building customer experience. As you mentioned generative AI, which create creative arts.
Correct.
So
I mean, I see the future artists really not having much work, but unless they adapt and learn towards AI as well.
Exactly. So adaptation is very important, and they need to use these technologies to increase the productivity and customer experience. But don't forget the augmentation. Like we can't replace humans from in this AI transformation. We need to augment the technology, and we need to involve human in the decision making, in the perspectives of ethics, and we need to enable people to absorb these new skills if there is a genuine threat from the existing skills. So we need to look whole transformation of the technology landscape. We need to expect that, and we need to focus having awareness and adopt these changing and emerging technologies.
So adapt the change, if not it will make you obsolete.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
the final message. Dr. Mahendra Samaravikrama, it's an absolute honor hosting you on BizNomics today. It's not every day we get to interview the ICT Professional of the Year of Australia, and it's an extreme honor for Sri Lanka as well to see a Sri Lankan who has come up through the Sri Lankan education system, being in Australia now and getting recognized, and also contributing so much towards the knowledge creation as well as the furthering and the extension of the industry in Australia as well as worldwide. And your willingness to work with Sri Lankan parties and help the Sri Lankan tech sector to grow is also commendable. Thank you so much for joining us, and may you be able to keep making the name of our motherland even more popular with your new developments and contributions. Thank you for joining us, and wish you good luck.
Thank you very much, Tarandu. It is a great honor for me having this discussion, and I am more than happy to support everyone to succeed in this AI journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Artificial intelligence, a technology you cannot ignore, whether you are a tech professional or a non-tech personality. You need to be aware of how AI can be the game changer in your business. It's no longer about coding. AI and other technologies are no longer limited to just tech professionals. Even business professionals need to understand what are these technologies and adapt them to your business. And until next time, I wish you a profitable week ahead. This is BizNomics.